It's true. All of it.
But boy also likes Bisquick and milk before you cook. You just make it into a paste.
And then it grows in your tummy, and he's miserable.
I can see that neither of you are likely to be enthusiastic.
We're having some audio issues.
What's up?
We're having some audio issues. I don't know what's going on.
Can you hear us?
I can hear someone talk, someone else. Go ahead.
Bill? David says, there was a lot of background noise and people were asking if it was supposed to be muted. Some still.
Pandora. On Pandora.
Okay, I've unmuted this now, so can you hear? Okay, signing off and we'll start. Bye-bye.
And a lot of
okay, we have hung up from speaking to Ava on the phone and we are now unmuted and ready to go. Very good. So with no further ado, I will welcome everybody here. Master Michael and Susie, welcome. Georgia, Deborah, and Demon up in Dallas. Welcome to all of you. And Brett's little girl, Samara. So there you go. Let me introduce, first let me welcome you to the new format. Instead of sitting around a dining room table and eating, we are going to have a more informal setting where we're on the couch. And obviously this way we can have guests without trying to squeeze around our teensy little table, which none of you could see anyway. You all thought that it was a normal-sized table, but it wasn't. So over here I have Rob, and Rob is who just moved to Austin from Santa Barbara, and we met a number of years ago. He's a whip master, and unfortunately our apartment is too small to do whip demos, but we'll have him over. We'll have him over when we can have other kinds of discussions. And then Brett is from Austin, and somebody that we've known a number of years again, and both of them are daddies, but of very different kinds. So we'll let them go into those discussions on their own. And then Jen is my owner, as most of you would know, and then I'm me. So with no further ado, did you want to bring up a topic? Start with a question?
Well, a little background history. A couple of months ago, Arach was visiting, and we went out to dinner prior to a mass meeting, and you guys will have to help, because I think there were margaritas involved. And something was said about, wouldn't it be cute if Arach was your daddy during the mass meeting? And it's sort of, I have a little thing about saying daddy.
It was brought up in a very humorous level and was not really meant as something that should move forward, but it had a will of its own.
Yes. And it got easier and easier to say daddy. And however, I'm not exactly certain what that actually means. And I don't think I could submit to somebody else's will, but does that mean I have to if I have a daddy? And what does this mean? And then all of the questions that I sent out for tonight's webinar. Is it age play? Is it kinky incest? How do you play with your little girl if you're a daddy? How does this all work? So we have some people to tell us how it works.
And do you want to go? Yes. Do you want to go into the background about why it might be additionally hard for you to say daddy to someone?
Oh, you may share all that you want to share.
Well, we do a kind of sex play that is called will versus skill. And Jen is into orgasm denial, her own orgasm denial. So
no, I denied somebody else. Yeah.
And so as we are playing along, and as the evening is heating up, and Jen is on the very verge of having to, trying to stop herself from going over. And I am in the verge of making her not able to stop. We get to the part where we say, you know what you're going to have to say.
No!
Now we come to her actually calling you daddy.
Ah.
Now it's that's why it'll add a little bit of psychological twist. You have a little challenge.
So she calls you daddy when she's ready to give in?
Well,
I'm acknowledging
that I can take her over.
Don't most people say uncle when they're conceding defeat?
Yes, but that's not the way this started.
Okay.
I did have somebody where I was a horrid uncle and they were the naughty niece, but we never set that up.
Tell us how, it doesn't matter which one wants to go first, how daddy works in your world.
You were talking about different times.
Yes.
You want to sort of set the general structure?
I'd be happy to. So I may be jumping ahead a little bit, but daddy girl is different from many other left and right / dynamics because it does not imply top or bottom or S&M play or dominance and submission in itself. Even though one is to the left and one is to the right, that does not have the meaning you're used to necessarily. There are dominant littles and submissive daddies, and they do not necessarily participate in kinky or even sex play. So a lot of the implications of the class structure aren't there. In fact, perhaps none of them.
Can I throw something in? When you say, I would like to hear that these structures answers come into play when you are enrolled. Because I know a lot of situations where there's a daddy little element to a relationship along with master-slave.
That's very true. This dynamic can coexist with other dynamics. It can be part-time or continuously alongside them, just as Arach says. So let me take this back to me now that I've answered that point. I follow a 24/7 MS dynamic with my partner, but also a 24/7 daddy-girl. The two are fully integrated. There's no switching back and forth from one dynamic to another, and there's no downtime from either. So my entrance into this is very much from the age play angle. There's a whole world of self-styled baby girls, and it's a very confusing term because they are women who desire a daddy figure but do not wish to adopt any childish behaviors. So what more confusing term could you choose than baby girl? Mm-hmm. They tend to spell it without a space. But nevertheless, that's what they need. It's a daddy-girl dynamic without age play or childishness. You might think of an older girl like Lolita in Nabokov was a teenager in some of it, I think. Very adult, not very childlike. So anyway, that's not where I come from. I come from the world of dolls, Barbie, My Little Pony, crayons, and diapers, and play dates, and tea parties, and things like that. It does a lot for me because I'm a serious guy. You can tell, right? I'm speaking in a very matter-of-fact, sort of lecturing mode. It does a lot for me to have someone in my life who is lighthearted, innocent. I would say that, in fact, Daddy Girl is largely about the economy of innocence and vulnerability.
And caring.
Certainly.
Caring for that person. That's very important.
Nothing in that to obstruct my MS relationship. In fact, I would say that is the emotional idiom of our MS relationship. It's one of affection and caretaking and service, but I prefer it to be expressed in those terms rather than a more like classic leather or kink slavery sense.
Do again, baby girl. Age play without.
That's Arach.
Okay.
Yeah, the relationship without age play or childishness. Those women tend to refer to themselves as baby girls.
Okay. So what is it again?
Baby girls are people who desire a daddy figure,
okay.
but do not identify as age players or littles. You may have at some point run into a vanilla couple where the woman, for some reason, called her husband daddy.
Yes.
It was just sort of inexplicable.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of the idiom of her affection. But there was no age play, and she was more little. But something about how she expresses love and romance is tied up in the father figure.
Great.
And that makes her feel very cared for, overseen, supervised, monitored, approved of in the particular ways that interest and excite her.
How does that kind of supervision, that kind of guidance differ from MS? Because it doesn't sound like it should.
Well, yeah, that's the point I would make as well, that training a slave need not differ that much from socializing a child. It's just a matter of style. I mean, in either way, you're acclimating someone to a household. And if you're acclimating them in the style of a young child or in the style of an adult, the lessons don't need to differ. These are your boundaries. This is where you go, this is what you eat, this is how we communicate. And if you do it with them in your lap or if you do it with them kneeling on the floor, it's still the same lesson.
I would agree. I'm not sure that there are lessons, protocols, mannerisms that I would see in a master-slave relationship that I would not necessarily see in a daddy-little girl relationship. The more sexual aspects, obviously, the kneeling, crawling, not sitting on the furniture, eating on the floor, any of those, what I would call more severe, more stronger.
But that's what children do. They sit on the floor.
Yeah, they do it on their floor.
Not necessarily. It's up to you.
Okay. In a daddy-little girl relationship, I would agree that it is your choice because you are the daddy. But in a more vanilla parent-child relationship, I think it would be rare or questionable to insist that your children eat on the floor.
You know, I've seen plenty of times where it is a special occasion, like, let's have a picnic on the floor, and it sort of...
Oh, absolutely.
I take your point, and further, I'll enlarge on that. I think you are going to have, in particular, of all the guests we might have had here, a really good feel for stage management.
Could be.
Right. Right. And a lot of these trappings and behaviors are stage management to convey that I have a continued interest in your role and identity as a little girl. And putting you on the floor to eat or telling you, no, you're not big enough for that stuff is a way of my continuing to buy into our shared identity in the same way I might tell a slave to kneel or crawl as a way of reminding them of their slavery. It's an enforcement of dominance. But you're right. It is totally selective and subjective, and you shouldn't go too far in saying it's patterned on actual parent-child relationships.
As I was educated as far as parent or daddy-little relationships, I tended to see it as three groups, and this is probably not the same as your structure. The first group would be people who were very much involved with diaper play, infant play, age play. Then going to the being able to communicate verbally, having tea parties, coloring, reading stories to that age group. And then what would be my choice, and that is a sexually active partner who is nevertheless considerably younger than me and who looks at me as an advisor, a mentor, a parental figure. But personally, I like sex a lot. So that would be an element of it. You talked about incest play. That's not something that...
That's not the attraction.
No, that's not a dynamic that actually I'll go so far as to say that's not a dynamic that pleases me. If I need a partner who is interested in that, then I would say, fine, if that is your interest, but that's not... I would want to know... the first question I would ask is why. Why is that necessary? What is important about that dynamic that's important to you? It's not important to me. It's possibly something to avoid in my mind, primarily because if that's the dynamic, there's most likely something else that's going on that I'm not aware of. I really, really want to know what is happening as far as that person's history, that person's relationships with parents they're actually dealing with. I want to spend a lot of time figuring that one out because I think everybody here has been involved with a situation where there's a trigger in there somewhere that you have to find out what it is before you play in that area. And I think that's an area that is fraught with triggers.
Sure. Certainly a great sign that there's deep water here.
Mm-hmm. Well, but I would say that the taboo, I think a lot of people are turned on by that, especially in our world. And so the incest play may be part of that turn on is that it is taboo.
And if I am satisfied that that's what's going on, okay, I'll play that. Actor, I'll role play. I'll be your dad. What did you do at school today?
But in the daddy relationship, where it may differ from a master slave is that if master says it's black, it's black. But if daddy says it's black, doesn't little girl have the right to say, and
Not only for black girl, but
I mean, you know.
Well, if it sounds like you might be suggesting something more like a brat dynamic, where both parties enjoy some verbal resistance and lack of cooperation from the more childish partner. And not all daddy-girl dynamics have an element of brattiness to them. I certainly think my little girl does a lot more whining in protest than many slaves, but I like it that way. It's because I realize that there's communication to have, and that she wants to please me, and she wants to go my way, whatever it may be. So I don't mind hearing hesitation from her, and I like that characteristic style of it. So I don't think she's off the hook at all for obeying and aligning her will with mine and so forth. She might get more cuddles before and after, but that's up for debate. A lot of people have very affectionate MS relationships. So it's all down to stage management and set dressing and the things that reinforce the roles. Her reassurance might come from the way I listen and coddle her in a sense, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be susceptible to her protest.
Mm-hmm.
In a master-slave or dominant-submissive relationship, I think it's perfectly appropriate to sit there and say, no, it's that way because I said it was that way.
We have to speak up a little. The mic's on.
Okay.
The mic's on the camera.
I would, in a master-slave or dominant-submissive relationship, I would feel free to say, no, it is this way because I say it this way.
Right.
In a daddy-little-girl relationship, I would tend to go toward, no, you don't understand my reasoning. Let me explain it to you.
Right.
As I would with my child, to the level that they can comprehend, I would try and explain to them, no, it's this way because this is what we want to occur. This is the result that we want, and I feel that this is a better way of doing it. So do it that way, okay? We'll try it that way, and if it doesn't work, then we'll talk about it. But that's how I would treat my children.
Mm-hmm.
If I could, I'll return to something you said earlier. Something you brought up, the suggestion that there are three groups I would largely agree with. It's very useful to draw a distinction between whether your partner identifies as so little that they're pre-verbal, in which case my fulfillment in the relationship goes out the window too. One of my first realizations is why I wanted a little girl-style partner. I wanted someone talkative and bright and cheerful.
Curious.
Of course, curious, yeah. So I have a certain amount of tolerance for a nonverbal partner, but I would say that it would be a mistake to say that only the oldest group is not sexual. They're all legal adults, and they may find that their sexual gratification lies in some people, when they regress, when they feel little, it's extremely sexual for them. They're immediately aroused, regardless of the age they identify as at that time. So I know plenty of people who regress to all sorts of loose ages and are sexual in all of them. I'm not necessarily a fan of picking a number for your age, but because it can be fun to have someone gravitate between ages and have that be an expression of your dominance. Like, no, you're not big enough for that. You have to wear that. And then the next day, no, you're too little for that. You have to wear this, or you're too big for that. To give comfort, to give humiliation, or deny comfort, that sort of thing. So you can press them up or press them down if you don't get hung up on ages. Nevertheless, it can be useful. You notice when people get into age play, they often agonize about how old they are as a little. And you can run with that to an extent and help them find what they enjoy and what's fulfilling to them. I like to say, well, when you go to the toy section, what do you gravitate to? Because usually those are very well laid out. There's a very simple infantile toy aisle, and it gets progressively more complicated. And if they like Legos or very sophisticated dolls, it can help them identify as little. You'll find that you can put the same coloring book in front of two people, and one will reach for the crayons, and the other prefers the complexity of colored pencils. Mm-hmm. So these are useful tools for picking age bands, but I just want to caution against saying that any of these can't be sexual. You can have a sexual relationship with someone who's expressed infancy even, and be fine with that, both parties.
But I would, again, in that case, I would want to know, I would want to dig deeper into the all.
I was going to say, where's the responsibility? I mean, they are an adult, but we talk about, we've had discussions about people who identify as little, and they say when they're in little headspace, they don't see themselves as able to make adult decisions.
Well, I do think you have to make your relationship negotiations as an adult. I certainly wouldn't make big relationship decisions. I wouldn't negotiate inside the emotional autonomy of a little for relationship issues. It's fun to negotiate with a little for play issues. I love that my little girl yells, "I don't like it," very petulantly when I'm spanking her. And I negotiate with that feeling, even though it's not her adult self-seeking necessarily. But I wouldn't do that for something to be furious. Now, I would argue that you should say, you can't do that to her. She's a child. She's really not. It's okay. She'll maintain the mental division. People will express this in a number of ways. We don't have good words for this, but your big self is still present and still guiding. After all, a child doesn't have a sexuality that you could interact with. When sex with a child is abuse, it's criminal, and this is not what we're discussing. They don't understand it.
I have to throw in there, yes, you're right. Sex with a child is abuse because they don't have the ability to make rational decisions, but that does not mean that children are not sexual.
Oh, yeah, I may be out of my depth on exactly how children are and are not sexual, but my point is that my girlfriend is sexual. She's an adult and is able to safely express that in the context of sex with the daddy figure.
And that, and you hear about people who will never, they say when you're drunk, it's not an excuse. If you wouldn't do it sober, you wouldn't do it drunk. And basically what I hear you saying is, even if you're in little headspace, if you wouldn't do it as a grown-up, you're not going to allow it to happen as a little.
That's true. Thank you. I enjoy that my little girl is gullible when she's in child headspace. It's great fun to tease little. It's hilarious. And I think that may be where I'm a sadist, is that I enjoy teasing my little girl a great deal. But I don't for a moment think that I'm taking advantage of an inability for her to consent.
I agree absolutely. You're dealing with an adult person who can negotiate as an adult, who has chosen this mode of behavior from an adult headspace. What I would also have to consider in my own head is that if we go to a point where this person is identifying with around the age of 10, and we have sex, I have to deal with the issue of what dynamic are we dealing with this other person identifying as 10 years old and my having sex with them. The play takes on a dynamic, which I think has to be dealt with. I'm not in any way saying that it's wrong, that it's abuse, that it's anything like that, because the decisions have been openly and knowledgeably negotiated from an adult headspace. Yet the roles that we get into, at the very least the role that I get into, here I am, and I am fucking a 10-year-old girl. I'm an actor. You know, I get into the role. So that's a dynamic that I would have to deal with.
We have a question actually from one of our attendees. Wrote it privately, so I won't identify the person. The question is, are you then saying it's all essentially role play?
Well, that's a tricky question, because there are populations in the umbrella term is age play, and that implies that it's play and therefore a role. But beneath that umbrella term are groups that embrace that it's something they do once in a while. It is not their identity. And then there are groups that say, no, this is my identity, and acting adult at all in my daily life is a burden.
Oh, okay. Actually, I've run into that in pony play, where you have somebody who is identifying as a pony and can't speak. And you have another person where you come up to them and they say, oh, I'm just playing this role, I'm just being a pony today.
That's true, and we know from vanilla life, some people have, the sibling that they consider slightly goofy, even well into adulthood, is a great fan of Disney, right? Still likes to wear overalls and so forth, and nobody realizes that it's the kink. Age play is one of those things that doesn't necessarily fit in with S&M or DS at all. It's simply a different way of identifying and being, so it gets included with kink because that's where it's okay to be different, even though it's just a headspace play. There's nothing inherently dominant in this about pony play, but we embrace the headspace players, whether it's something they can put on and take off, like a role, or whether it's something that they feel they are, but get to finally be.
I would disagree, though, that pony play, and to an extent age play, does not have at least a touch of the dominant submissive dynamic. As any parent-child relationship would have, one person has the legal responsibility for the behavior of the other. So they are, to that extent at least, dominant in the relationship. They have more responsibility in the relationship. I would also say that in pony play, one is the trainer and the other is the pony, and I would say that is a dominant and submissive aspect to the relationship.
And Brett, your little girl has a question. Go ahead, Samara.
Yeah, hi. I was talking, the other person in the room is psionic, so we're talking on FET actually. But you guys were talking about headspaces, and he and I were both kind of agreeing that, at least for us, the headspaces aren't necessarily like during a scene or something like that. It's more of a 24/7 deal. Like, I'm not necessarily little in that I sometimes enjoy, I don't know, et cetera things, but I'm little in that I always, as my daddy said, I always enjoy Disney. I always enjoy, like, wearing cartoon shirts. I always enjoy my stuffed animals. And so if it is a headspace thing, it's kind of like an always headspace thing. So we just thought that might be a nice little point to bring up.
Thank you very much.
I say whatever she approaches with innocence and enthusiasm that's characteristic of her 24/7 headspace as a little identified person. Something you mentioned earlier reminded me, though, that spontaneous regression during sex does happen. You might consent to sex with someone who identifies as an older teen, or even just a vanilla partner, and they can spontaneously regress during sex. It makes things very uncomfortable for you if you weren't prepared for that. And I want to take that back to consent because my little girl does not lose the ability to preserve herself during sex. For example, she has fresh piercings. I shouldn't mess with her nipples. And regardless of what headspace she's in, she's going to stop me and remind me that I can't damage those fresh piercings. I should leave them alone. She is present as an adult to be able to point out that, yes, as her master, it's my choice to damage her healing nipples. But she would point out that regardless of what play we were doing. So that capacity doesn't go away. But I do occasionally see people talking about having spontaneously regressed with their partners or being unable to have sex without regressing. And that certainly would mean needing to have a relationship negotiation or just a play or sex negotiation as an adult with your adult partner about how they feel about that and how they can come to grips with it, like you said, so they aren't put in an awkward spot. When it comes about very naturally during sex, spontaneously, you don't know whether to follow that trail and see what happens and go with it, or throw a flag and say, let's table this and figure it out. Maybe if you've been together longer, you're comfortable just going with it and seeing where it goes. I know I wouldn't if it were a very new partner. Yeah.
One thing, as a parent and as a master, sometimes you just don't want to be a parent and you just don't want to be a master. Some days are just those days. As a daddy, obviously I'm certain you have those days, everybody does, but the question is, how hard is it to maintain? You identify as this person, so I would assume that you're that person all the time, but then you're in the role of caring for another. How hard is it just to, what if they want to play and you just don't?
I can take this. But
let me pull in, Paul. You have to understand, I am speaking from the kind of relationship that I want. Mm-hmm. Okay. There are people, I'm not sure whether I'm a 24/7 daddy person. I am a multiple person. So there will be times when I want to say, no, you do it this way because I told you. There are times when I want to say, come here, sit in my lap, let me read you a story. There are times when it's, I am just really tired. So you can eat a back rub, that's all I want. Tired. So I personally definitely agree. There are times when I don't want to take on the responsibility of being a 24/7 parent, taking care of any kind of child. I have two very healthy boys. Thank you. I don't want to necessarily take on the responsibility of being a master. I want to come home and I don't care, just take care of me. I don't even know what I want. I don't want to think about it. Just take care of me.
I think it's critical that you cultivate your little partner's service capabilities if you're going to sustain a 24/7 or even coaching that dynamic, so that it is not all one way. It's true that the relationship is modeled on a caretaking model where the energy is coming from the big or the parent figure and being transferred to the little, but that would seem to sort of invert any kind of service dynamic. So you can do that. You can have a submissive daddy and a dominant little girl. One of my exes is now in that mode and very happy, I'm sure. But one of the rules that you hopefully learn as a dominant when you're working your way through your early totally dominant relationship is you don't dom yourself into a corner by setting up rules or protocols that force your hand or force you to do things you don't want to do. You still need to realize that this is a relationship I'm constructing. I'm going to set the rules so that it can exist within my energy level and isn't going to obligate me to fabricate an interest that it should be according to my desires from moment to moment. And just as Arach said, it is something I want to do. So that helps tremendously. I just need to tailor it and train my adult partner. And there may be times where I say, baby, I'm going to need you to be a little bigger girl. And I am dominating her within the idiom of our relationship. So I'm not dropping the daddy girl dominance, but I am also, it's a reason not to have it. She doesn't get to say, but I'm two. No, she's not. She can be a little bigger right now because I'm two. And she can go get me some tea, or she can give me that back rub.
Absolutely.
And now, if I ask her to cook me things, she may be afraid of the bacon in the pan because it's popping grease at her and come out crying at me. This has happened. But how brave and how wonderful that my little girl is learning to do that for me. So I would say you have to steward your business. Oh, I wanted to toughen her up.
No, I wouldn't put her in the microwave.
Are there daddy schools? Because I mean, the way you phrase things,
Yes, marvelous.
really are. Yeah.
I've never heard of a daddy
No.
school.
No, I think that's
I've seen
that's an
demos.
opportunity to create.
Yes.
I've seen demos of daddy little girl relationships it's such an umbrella term. There are daddy little girl relationships, I think, which are mutually incompatible. It's not like, okay, here's a progression that goes from here to here, pick where you want to be. I think there are possibilities of having a daddy little girl relationship in this structure, which is totally incompatible with a daddy little girl relationship in this structure. So there might be a school, but I'd rather have a university.
Well, maybe we could set up a correspondence course or something like that.
Something about the terminology, and how to deal with it.
It's stage management. It's using the terms that will be understood that do not detract from your roles, that deepen your roles. Nevertheless, you want to have a relationship that is not going to drain you and leave you exhausted. And as a dominant, it's your responsibility to set expectations. And that's no different in sexual relationships. And if I don't want to watch a Disney movie, I'm not going to watch a Disney movie. I might indulge my partner, but she might see 30 minutes into it. I'm not really into it, and she'd really, honestly, rather watch something I want to watch.
Very good point, because the relationship where parent and child all together too often, you see parents saying, "Oh, go watch Disney." But in a daddy little girl relationship, the relationship is to meld the two people together. So if you're not really into seeing the little princess again, the little will be much more sensitive to that than a real child might be.
So it's give and take. I give so that I may take. And so when I have the energy to take her to a Disney film or play with her in a childlike way, I do it. Because I may not want that all the time, and she needs it, she loves it, and I like it. I want to do it when I can do it, because I know there will be times I can't, or where I want to see that she will learn to like the things I like. I personally think that's an important aspect of slavery, that she will come to genuinely appreciate things I care about. So I need to find time where I can expose her to those things and get her to make the effort to cultivate an interest for me. So picture a little girl with her notebook, learning about the spy novels I write or something like that.
I think another aspect of what I enjoy most about this relationship, for me at least, is a term you brought up many times, and that's enthusiasm. Children, or children-ish, children-like people, have more enthusiasm. They want to go out and discover things. They want to go out and see things. They want to play with this. And how does your computer work? And how did that picture happen? And where did that mask come from? And how did you make this? They're curious. They're enthusiastic. They those that want to please really, really want to please. And that is that enthusiasm is glorious for me. Besides, I'm 66, and most women I'm attracted to are far younger than me, so it works.
Me too. I like the little, the young women too.
You can ask to speak up.
Okay.
Sorry, they're in my throat.
We were at we were doing a weekend intensive, and at one point, a little girl was sitting at the floor playing with her dolls, braiding the hair and coloring and everything, and I'm drawn to this, and I'm saying, yeah, I would like to have a little girl. I think that would be fun. I have no skills. Now, you say, well, you raise children, you have a slave, you have the skills.
Doesn't mean you have the skills.
I don't have the skills. I don't have the terminology anymore. When we first started,
I could love it. I can't think of those things.
When we first started, I felt very much like a parent. And I would complain all of the time that I didn't sign up to be a parent. And so I'd like to take the parent term out of our discussion, because I think daddy is different than parent.
It's up to you. You define your relationship. I'm very much a parent, but I've been in relationships where I was not.
And I can't tell you why I felt that way, but I wanted a nurturing relationship, but I got pushback, and it wasn't a cohesive thing. It was the parent saying it's going to be this way, and the kid saying, oh no, it's not. So that's why I'm saying it feels like it's like daddy should be more, what you guys are talking about, regular kind of.
Well, a good dad can be pretty cold and remote to make his point sometimes. You have to be able to control that. I don't know what to tell you except that you get to define it however you like, and if you have mutual terms set up, some littles would say, oh, well, then why don't you be my aunt? They would negotiate with you in adult headspace. This will work for me. If I think of you as my aunt or as my governess or as my babysitter, then I won't engage these behaviors that I would do for a parent. I'm not saying that those are universal terms or something that would work for everyone, but you'll probably, if you try to negotiate with a little, you'll find some way to have the interaction you want without the emotional weight of roles you don't want.
I know we have a question waiting, but I wanted to remark on your remark, and that is you have to do some really strong thinking about what is it to be a parent? What are you limiting? Why are you putting yourself in the role where you have to be the administrator rather than the playmate? Because parents are playmates as well.
That's true. You're right.
Demon, go ahead.
Howdy, Jan. I'm pointing this at you, Jen. You know it. Go ahead and grin. Your thing on the whole parent, let's step back a couple of days ago when my friend visited your house. Then, remember?
Yes?
Well, it's not that much different. Remember, you didn't put on the cows, you didn't put on makeup, but Mama still came out. It's perception. and conversations we've had before about perception. You can perceive it as, and I think that's where you're drawing a line. On one hand, you're going, okay, when I think parent, I'm thinking like my children. But you can quite easily flip that because you've done it before. You go, well, parenting just means I'm the one that controls you.
Okay, but still maintain that playful side instead of just always being the disciplinarian or the.
But that's not what parent means. I'm daddy 24/7 in a bunch of different ways, but it's not always disciplinarian. And sometimes, I make them stand up and have equal footing with me. You want to be a man, well, since I've got all boys, you want to be a man, I especially demanded out of my girl, okay, let's see how big your bra is, honey. Stand up and let's talk about this. So you have to kind of, even as a biological parent to being, you have to kind of sometimes think about exactly where are we? Because, there are adult children as well. I think your kids are old enough now, they're off to school. You're not always that mama. Sometimes you're just a friend, but you're still a parent.
Okay.
I would say there are also different ways to display your authority. Most of us are familiar with the fact that if we meet something head on, it's either going to overwhelm force and succeed or fail spectacularly. It's a very brittle approach. Okay, if you meet something directly, you set yourself up to be a force to be opposed. More subtle parenting, more subtle teaching. A teacher can't fight every student in the room. They have more subtle ways of doing crowd control. And if you think about those skills, which you've no doubt demonstrated in the past, ways of getting people to be on your team, essentially, and go with you. There's the cool dad and the cool mom who just sort of suckers the kids into being good kids half the time. You don't want to display naked authority until you have to.
And that may be where I went wrong in the master slave, is that as a parent, I was the cool parent. And my children would tell me things I didn't want to know. They felt safe coming to me. And when I came into master slave, I understood that I needed to be less that, and may have gone to an extreme or may have just really misunderstood what it was. But it failed miserably.
Well, all of you have the advantage on me. I've never raised biological children. I have no intention to. Sounds like all of you have, but I have occasionally had partners who
You don't have to.
I've had partners who told me stories of how their parents related to them well, better than my parents related to me, and how they weren't necessarily less strict, but they might be more responsive. They might engage in more dialogue, but then the boundary was still there. So it didn't encourage rebellion.
I got an interesting point. I got around rebellion because starting when the kids were first reading teens, 5, 6, 7. 5, 6, 7, I'd say, we're getting along really great now. I'd really like you to remember this now. Because I know that when you get to be in 7th, 8th grade, you're going to think I'm just the dumbest thing around. And we go on and on and on like it. And we never went through that period with them. They went completely through adolescence without any pushback.
Yeah, I didn't have any pushback from my kids probably until their second year in college.
Oh, well, that's pretty appropriate.
And by then they were like, okay, Mom, I'm growing a little bit beyond your knowledge.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, that age they tend to feel that they can make their own decisions, and we should respect that.
Absolutely.
Shame on them.
Go fly. I will catch you when you fall.
So it's certainly an interdependent relationship. We have to find ways to express that. And if you're looking for somebody to just have an experience with you, that load is not there. You might just have a conversation and say, hey, if you call me mommy, that's what this means to me. And if what you mean by mommy always means that, pick a different word. And we'll watch a movie and hang out, have s'mores, whatever gets you the experience that'll work without after effects. There are certainly some very neat people who will have a little trouble turning that off after they've bonded with you in that way. But this is what we do all the time in terms of the physical play. You create a bond with somebody. The oxytocin is there, and it takes a couple of days. That part of drop is the separation, and this is emotional edge play in that sense. So you have to be aware of what you're putting in, what you're anteing up when you do this play.
Something, if I may, something I learned from your webinar actually is how important what they hear when they use the same word. There are so many traps that happen, and I think possibly even deeper ones when you get into age play. The taking the time to say, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Demon has his hand up, but I don't know. But you had a question?
I did. Where does Polly fit into Daddy Girl?
Well, before you do that, let me read what something that Psionic Storm wrote to everybody. I think, let me see. Personally, for me, when I daddy a little girl, it's not about playing a role, but more about providing everything I can to make them as happy as possible. And then Demon said, but isn't that why we all do this in the first place? Psionic Storm, I'm sure that it's true for a lot of people, Demon, but many people have different motivators and needs. And then Samsara says, I think it's different for some, at least looking at daddy relationships versus other styles, like how a slave generally provides the perfect environment for a master mistress. The daddy generally helps to create that environment for the little. And then Psionic Storm said, yeah, well said. And then Demon said, I mean on a bigger picture, the reason that we do what we do all together. Good points. Demon, is your hand up at this point?
No, not really. I was more so pointing questions at your audience. We were just kind of chatting there.
Okay.
Y'all got a good conversation going there. But this is one question I got at everybody. Am I the only dominant on this side or not?
No, you got Master Michael and Slave Susie are current title holders for Great Lakes Master Slave, for example.
Okay, so I'm not the only dom out here. Okay, they were just being quiet.
So to Polly, where does Polly fit in a Daddy Girl? Because I would assume that you're nurturing, and if your little girl wants to go play with the little boy, that you would say, he's fine, he's safe, go play.
You're setting up a structure already. You're saying there's one dominant, and then there's a little boy and a little girl. So, and why is that necessarily your example of Polly? Polly can, as I said earlier, daddy, little girl is like an umbrella term for a lot of different ways of interacting. Polly is even more so. Polly, you can have more kinds of relationships than I can structure in the time we have left.
Well, but I understand you can have several different relationships. I understand Polly, but I'm wondering on the little girl side of it.
Well, first of all, I couldn't be happier with how you approach that. That is great that we are implying all kinds of things by sort of stamping a nuclear family mold onto this. Things that will not hold true and will not survive adult needs in every case. You're sort of setting yourself up for failure. There's difficulties in identifying a daddy girl. There's little conflict with poly relationships because we're modeling this relationship, first of all, on a lifetime relationship that is, first, that's treacherous. That may not be true. It can be difficult to get someone to accept that you're probably going to have multiple daddies over time. You should probably prepare for that. Finding a daddy is not finding a forever daddy. That's a biological thing. Only one person will ever have contributed those genes, you know? So also, why not have multiple daddies at the same time? That can be possible emotionally for some people.
If you really want to get into this, what you should do is research and get the books with it.
Mm. For Sex at Dawn, we'll talk about cultures where universally everyone has a feeling of fatherhood to all the children because effectively all the children are the pooled genes of all the men of the tribe.
Yeah.
I would say that the unstated assumption is that a daddy girl is a monogamous relationship. It's a very dangerous assumption. And
I'm sorry, let me ask you're saying that it is a dangerous assumption. Are you saying that most people make that assumption?
I think so. I think that it is implied when you seek a daddy that you're seeking a monogamous relationship. Based on my observation of internet relationship seeking and the patterns that many people fall into, I would say that most people, by default, before this dream sort of hits reality, are seeking their partner, their one partner, to be a daddy-girl unit forever. And when you probe, it might be that there is no concept of mommy relationship whatsoever, and there's no concept of siblings. So if you want to pursue the family metaphor really rigidly, you can use that as an instrument for poly. If that works for both sides, to go and use that language and say, well, okay, this person is your sister, and this person is your cousin, this person is your uncle, and this person is your puppy, and look, we're still playing house. So
I think what you have to come to eventually is, first of all, the old ABC bit. If you have two people, you have one person, this person, and the relationship between two. If you have three people, you have 1, 2, 3 people, this relationship, and this relationship. It explodes geometrically. So that's what happens when you have poly. But each relationship should be open to the same negotiation that you have in any other.
Demon has his hand up. Go ahead, Demon.
Game arguments. I know we're using the term, I'm hoping we're using the term loosely daddy. Am I echoing that?
No, you're speaking a little fast for us to follow.
Oh, I'm sorry, I slowed down.
Thank you.
I'm hoping that we're using the term daddy loosely because, I kind of see this dynamic a lot on my Bad Lesbian Sundays kind of flipped because there's mama. There's the mama role. And mama, from my perspective, is the same as daddy, but she's a little bit more multifaceted. I'm your sister, when you need me to be your sister. I'm your daddy when you're getting on my nerves. I'm your mama when you need nurturing. And so I think it rotates. In specific negotiated dynamics, I think it does stay along a given line. I'm always a daddy. I'm big, you're small. This does not change. But I think it's kind of the perspective of which you're coming from. And I just want to throw the mama in there because whenever I see the flip of this with mama tends to, just like your mother does, especially if she's a single mother. She's your father, she's your mother, she's your friend, she's your confidant, and she's your sister when you need her. So I think from time to time, it becomes multifaceted, it changes. It's like a gyroscope, it kind of moves.
Yeah, I would respond to Demon and say that in my experience, I just haven't come across many mom-identified people, and I feel much poorer for it. I don't really mix with the lesbian crowd as much as I would like, I'm really encouraged by the fact that apparently they identify as mom. That's great, and I wish I saw more of it in sort of the standard little circles that I'm in. But I would say that for poly, you can use the metaphors, and you can say, listen, parents don't love a child less because they have another child. If you really need to talk about it from a daddy-girl perspective and can't take a broader poly perspective, you could use structures like that to make your point. But I also think it's really helpful and useful and healthy for littles to have a shared brotherhood and sisterhood so that they can express their little side without requiring a relationship with a dominant or a big identified partner. You frequently see littles pining away for that one person who can bring out and accept them, when in fact they might have 20 people around them who could. They're just all their brother and sister littles and age players. So I think fostering relationships between littles, they may not be overtly sexual, but they may be, is a really healthy thing to do.
Go ahead, Demon.
This is pointed at the guests, both of them. So you're both coming from a monogamous only child sort of situation?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
When you've only got like each one kid, you know, one little, or are there multiple littles involved?
I have one little girl. We both identify as poly, but our relationship is new enough that we're pretty focused on each other, and when we play with others, we do it together. So it's a phased approach, but we're not planning on lifetime monogamy.
I should say that I am currently partnerless. I have lived in this location for less than a month, so I am just getting to know the community.
Okay. I guess that's the kind of general tone I'm getting, that perspectives are, this is the daddy and this is the girl and that's the relationship, and that there aren't others. Because from that particular perspective, all the relationships I know of, and I'm speaking as a gay man, there's never just one boy or one girl. Like I've got 5 boys and girls at this point.
No, I'm very much opposed to the one daddy, one girl, rigid association, because I think, and this is my bias, I think that is a little unhealthy, that you're retreating from adult relationships and retreating into the cocoon of childhood in that sort of relationship. Again, my bias.
And on your bias, and this is not looking at you, this is when you look out on the other people. At what point, because I've seen this, do you look and you go, okay, yes, they're monogamous, but what I smell here is something unhealthy. When do you see that, or do you see it when you look out? Because I do see some couples that are doing this daddy-girl thing, and they're doing exactly what you said. They're retreating from the adult responsibility. They're going into this unhealthy cocoon to the point to where it's just a damaging relationship. Where do you see that point, or do you see it?
Okay.
Well, I frequently have to address the line between codependency and interdependency. A daddy-girl relationship or a good dom-sub or daddy-boy relationship has some level of interdependency, and that means you're exchanging needs, you're being emotionally vulnerable, but it is improving the two of you. You're getting somewhere with this exchange. Whereas if you're feeding off one another's needs and becoming less capable, that is a codependent relationship.
Yes, if the other person's dysfunction is necessary for you to feel good, so you can be the helper, the parent, the whatever, if that is a part of the dynamic, that is dysfunctional, that is codependent.
Yeah, so that's one sign.
I would say, go ahead.
I would like to push it out then. Now this is, I'm a hyena, so the two sitting next to you can tell you I don't do a lot of community, but every now and then I stick my hand in. What do the two of you feel a point when you're out? Because when it's all said and done, we all live in the forest and nobody lives in the walls. When do you feel it's time to speak? When you see not only it's become and is an unhealthy relationship, but it's beginning to spread like an infection. Do you feel that it's the wiser, older of us, the more communal of us to speak out? Or do you think it's just something, well, let's just let this roll until it burns out?
Go ahead.
Well, it's a general question, and it's not specific.
And it's sort of going in a whole other realm that we're not
well,
dealing with
it's
here.
not specific to this dynamic. It's anytime you see something that is unhealthy, you know, how do you speak up? And using this dynamic, if you were to see another couple who seem to be not going in a growing pattern, how do you understand?
Yeah. Earlier in this discussion, I talked about why are you getting into this relationship? What is it? We mentioned it in terms of incestual aspects of it, or sexual relationships with someone who's very particularly young. I think there are times, certainly in beginning the relationship, I would want to find out in my own relationship why that dynamic is important. Communication, delving really deeply into the whys and wherefores of this is important. If I see this in someone else and I begin to suspect that they are into this because of what I would call more dysfunctional reasons, it really depends on my relationship to them and my relationship with the community. For instance, right now, I wouldn't say a word because I've been here for a month. I hardly know anybody. If I got to know them better and could communicate, then I would feel more free to ask questions like, what do you mean by that? Where is that coming from?
I'm speaking on something else. Viruses spread. And this is that's the point I'm speaking from. Unhealthy relationships, from what I've noticed watching communities, if you got a couple and they're doing everything wrong, this is going to be more than likely the couple who's going to speak up and reach out to other people and go, oh no, this is the way to do it, and you want to do this. They're like a virus spreading their infection. Do you feel?
Viruses
I can see the two of you. You're going to not only carry, but you're also going to present a very healthy relationship. You know, you're going to make this known, you're going to make it seen. So the most people probably get is praise. However, let's flip it and let's go over to the bad people. You know, do you feel this is something that, because we do come together, and when we come together, would you feel comfortable to speaking? Because you never know where your next daughter or son's going to come from, and that's pretty much the angle I'm coming from. I see it's always, I really hate to see it when new people come into the community and get ruined right off the top. You know, how do you and would you interject?
You know, I can say that I'm usually pretty good about confronting people in a way that they'll accept. I have mentioned to women I know only slightly that they seem to be moving awfully fast. The word daddy is a shortcut into very deep emotional connection. So if I know someone even slightly, I can just point out, that's awfully fast. Have you made plans for this or this? And start a conversation without being so confrontational that it turns into an argument right away. I remember one time feeling a little irritated and upset when the girl was going to college, and it was a difficult thing for them to make happen. And she was so proud that she was majoring in English. And I'm biased. I prefer degrees that will lead to employment. And So I actually wrote her daddy and said, what the hell are you thinking? You know, what kind of daddy, well, I didn't go quite that far, but in more words, like, are you thinking ahead? Are you doing your job here? In letting that kind of thing fly. So I've done it a few times, Dina. But I would say that good habits also spread. Healthy relationships also spread. And if you model good behavior, people will be curious. My little girl has been pretty public sometimes about how her grades have improved, how she's held a job longer than she's ever held a job. A lot of good things have happened, and I think that that has led people to be curious about how to replicate that in their relationship.
Let me address something right now because we're over time, and somebody in the audience said, "How to change the format?" The answer is yes. We actually changed the format at the first of the year, and this is the first session. But we are going to wrap it up now. The change in format is this. Instead of it being dinner with Jen and Dr. Bob, where we held it just to an hour, we're now going to be having, we're going to let other people take over the entire program, and we're asking them to hold it roughly to an hour. So today we have people here with us in the living room, Arach and Brett. However, we have some scheduled that are coming along, but we're going to turn the video over to them entirely, and they'll do a remote presentation. Furthermore, our presentation for Valentine's Day is going to be a live demo. It's, as you guys read, Playing with a Pussy. So
actually, it was more like torture the girl while you have fun.
That's right, torture the girl. Yes. But yes, we have changed the format with Ava's permission, whose site this is that is hosting us.
Thank you, Ava.
And I do appreciate you mentioning something, so I'd mention it out loud, and thank you for catching it. But I would like to go ahead and...
Well, we need to ask for if anybody has...
any last-minute questions? Last question.
Or statement.
Anything you want to say? Anything?
No.
No.
No, he never does.
And maybe your little girl has the last comment.
Baby, any thoughts? Parting shot.
Yes, actually, the one thing I wanted to mention about personal growth, you can, as a little, it's really great to be able to, there's just so many more avenues than taking direction as it would be in a standard MS relationship. Like, we have sticker books, which is like the coolest thing ever because I get My Little Pony stickers and glittery princess stickers and stuff like that. But it's kind of like bribery for me, but it's not really. But it's just this great way to where he can kind of mold me into the kind of person he wants me to be, in a way that doesn't set off my little side into like pouting and whining and want to go like eat ice cream instead. So that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You were able to join us.
Anybody else before we sign off?
Our next webinar.
Next webinar is going to be pretty interesting.
We have a lot of people who are going to be here to help us. When we did the webinar on aging with Master Don, right at the very end, and I'm going to get the person incorrect who asked, but Master Tangier?
Master Michael wrote to us.
No, somebody at Master Tangier at the very end of the webinar said, can we discuss physical aging?
Right.
And we've tried to do this at the beginning of...
Master Michael wrote to us similarly.
Master Michael Britt. And we tried to do this...
also asked about parting when you have an older partner who passes away. How do you deal with that?
Well, and that was the... I think that was answered because she was there at that webinar, and I think that was answered. But we tried to do this at the beginning of December, and that's why there wasn't a webinar then. It just couldn't.
Well, what happened was we have a physician coming on next in the next session, 2 Tuesdays from now, and the physician at the last minute could not come on in December, and we canceled the whole seminar. But we met this particular OB-GYN. We met Al when we were doing a presentation at the conference, and somebody in the audience asked a question about I was fisting gin, and they were asking a fisting question about postmenopause. And Dr. Al explained that about the cell wall thickness and aging in women for their vaginal canal. And so Dr. Al, so that's very relevant to our webinar for the next webinar. So Al is going to be on, and then locally here, Tri Rust, Sir Tri is going to be on, and he has lots and lots of military medic experience, and also had some physical issues that changed the way he could play in his own lifestyle. And then Master Talon is going to be on. He fell out of remotely from the Dallas area. He fell out of a tree and shattered his pelvis, broke a leg and a couple of ribs, and that seriously affected his play. So we're going to talk about that.
Master Michael. And
Master Michael is on also as part of that panel. So I hope that you're all able to join us next time, and thank you all for coming.
And we want to thank
I
Arach.
want to thank Ava for hosting us. Thank you very much. And Brett and our Master Arach, thank you very much for coming. And we'll hope to see all of you guys in 2 weeks. Bye-bye now. Let's see. Can you remember how to get out of all this?
You have to put your arrow